Hello, everybody. I am interviewing the beautiful Lisa Edgerton. My name is Belinda Chapman. I'm host this Compassionate Women's Health community. Today, we've got Lisa's personal story around womb health. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, B.
I'll just do a bit more of a formal introduction so that everyone knows who you are. So, Lisa has a keen interest in women's health and old wise wisdom, along with contemporary approaches to support the seasonal and cyclical nature of women through the ebb and flow of the life journey. Lisa is an Arvigo Abdominal Therapy practitioner, a yoga student and teacher with over 20 years experience. Lisa also has a background in community development engagement in the not-for-profit and corporate sectors. She's a lover of crafting and participating in rituals and ceremonies to support women to be acknowledged and witnessed as they mark and navigate through important life transitions and events. So, as I said, Lisa's going to share her personal story with womb health. So, I love to just basically hand it over to you now, Lisa, to share this journey that you've experienced over the last few years around this womb space.
Thank you, Belinda, and thanks for asking me to come on board and share my story. It's been quite an empowering thing for me to reflect and to offer this. So a very warm thank you to you.
Oh, thank you.
So yes, this is my womb story, a love story, my womb story. So a number of years ago, it probably was about 8 years ago, I was having some real trouble with my menstrual cycle, namely about pain. And at that time, I felt like I didn't have a real connection with my womb. I kind of had an idea about when my period was due and when I was ovulating.
Yeah.
And that was probably about it. I felt like there was a bit of a disconnect with my womb and my cycles. At times I felt it was quite inconvenient. I've always done lots of sport and been very, very active. So at times I felt, very inconvenienced by this cycle of being a woman.
Yeah.
And coming back to 8 years, what I mentioned 8 years ago, where I was in incredible pain, where to the point where, nauseousness, almost fainting, vomiting, prior, maybe day one or just prior to my period, and again on ovulation. And so it turned out to be endometriosis. And so at that time, I chose to have some minor surgery to remove that, which it worked. I had no further significant symptoms at that time, but it began a journey around my relationship with my womb. During my recovery from that minor surgery, I had a dear friend, Michaela, share with me a book, The Wild Feminine by Tammy Lynn Kent, and that kind of opened up a whole new way of relating to my womb, but also introduced me to a modality called the Arvigo techniques of abdominal massage. And at the time, I had my finger on the pulse of many different therapies, but I hadn't heard of this one before, and it really piqued my interest. And so I went on Google and to see, what is it, and is there any practitioners in Brisbane? And I was very fortunate enough to find the lovely Andrea Lopez, who is in the Sunshine Coast, but at that time was coming to Brisbane once a month and offering this incredible abdominal massage and womb steams for women. And so I went along and I had my first session, and I was just blown away from my internal response, my visceral response, my nervous system response to this massage and this nourishing, almost primal womb steam. And it kind of set forth some incredible curiosity about I've never thought about, having a relationship with my womb, and there's a bit of trauma that is being held in the tissues of my womb. I really can feel and really can sense that, and some trauma from this surgery as well. And so through this modality, you're taught a self-care massage. So I pretty diligently began to offer my own belly massages, and having steams at home, and I began to have a felt sense of, this is what it feels like to be a little bit more aware, to be a bit more in tune, to have more of a connection with my womb. Excuse me.
You were already a massage practitioner by this point, weren't you? Like
I had done through my yoga training, I had studied shiatsu.
Yes.
Yeah. And not long after that, I felt like I really want to train in this modality. And so I did some training in Kahuna massage. And then when some trainers came over to Australia to offer this practitioner course, I then sat that. And since then, I've been offering this beautiful modality to other women. But keeping back to sorry, V, yeah.
I'm really curious about that book as well. Like, what were some of those key sort of insights that you got from that book that helped you make that connection? I mean, sometimes it does take something like endometriosis to force our hand a little bit to dive deeper and create that relationship. But what was it also in that book that?
I think for me, it was around that the body keeps the score, and that we hold issues in our tissues. And so I have had trauma around my womb space and around, my vagina. And so I began to put pieces together around, there's stuff being held here. There is emotional stuff being held here that hasn't been looked at, that hasn't been explored or given voice. Yeah. And that in this book, Tammy also talks around, particularly when women have had miscarriages or other trauma, to honour and to have some ritual around that, rather than pushing that aside, being cut off from my neck, all in my head, and just moving forward with my life. It made me pause, it made me stop, it made me curious around how today I have been living my life with my, from here above here. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yes, you were saying you did the Arvigo technique.
Yeah, and so I have done a number of trainings in this modality here and in America and in New Zealand as well. And I've met some incredible women through this training and this approach. And I felt like it's given me a framework to have a much deeper, more honest and transparent relationship with myself and my womb and my cycles and the cycles of Mother Nature as well. And it feels like there's this old wise teachings that there's this yearning for, this knowledge of, why didn't I know this? Yeah. And so having that beautiful framework and a lot more knowledge and a lot more awareness. About 3 years ago, I noticed my cycle was getting really heavy, like ridiculously heavy. And one period, like, it really scared me. And I was, late 40s, I was feeling like it was possibly, perimenopause stuff. So I went to the doctor and she sent me off to a gynecologist, and then the gynecologist said, look, I really feel you need to see a gyno-oncologist, and hearing that word oncologist, it just freaked me out.
I bet.
I was like, okay, right, okay. So I had an ultrasound before I went to her, and she just said, your endometrium looked like it's quite thick, thickening of the endometrium. So we need to get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
So I went to this gyno-oncologist who she recommended, and I didn't have a very good experience with them in just their bedside manner. So within a few minutes of me being in this room with him, this oncologist, he said to me, "You'll need a hysterectomy," without hearing much about my story or doing any more tests. So he said, "Come back and have a CT scan and come back." So I knew when I walked out I was going to come back to him, but I went to my GP and I told her about my experience, and she said, "Let's find you someone." We found someone else, another gyno-oncologist who I went to, and so I then had a CT scan and an MRI, and it came back that I had some hyperplasia and a tiny lesion, which it was a question mark whether it was early endometrial cancer.
Yeah.
But just hearing those words around, the grading, and hearing those words of cancer, I kind of really was met with a lot of my unconscious fears and story around the word cancer. And so that led me to quite a bit of a journey over the next 2 years. So I like to have a lot of information that really I feel quite empowered to find out the nitty-gritty around stuff and information. So I overloaded with lots of reading and information. I checked in with Andrea, and I had a very lovely specialist as well. And so at that time, I didn't want to go straight into a hysterectomy. I wanted to give my womb a chance. And with all this new information, I felt I wanted some time, and luckily I did have the time to really dive into, my mind, my exercise, my health, and my diet, to try and approach it from all these angles. So one option which I chose to go with was to have a Mirena, an IUD with some slow release hormones. And even me receiving that, I had so much judgment before that, and which I wasn't that aware of. I was like, no way, I'll never get a Mirena, I'll never get an IUD. And here I was, getting a Mirena.
Yeah, so, this is where we have like the modern science, isn't it? Like,
And so I've got this modern science, and I've got all this other stuff, and then my knowledge about health and well-being as well. And so over the next 12 months, so I had to have a number of DNCs, dilation and curette, and testing the tissues and the cells. Probably had 3 of those over a 12-month period. And at the time, I wasn't aware, but each time, I know I was holding a bit more trauma in my womb from these little surgeries. So after that 12 months, excuse me, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. So
when they did the biopsies, were they precancerous? Like,
yes. Yep. It wasn't getting any better. So the Mirena was kind of holding things just there. It wasn't an ideal solution in the longer term. So I was quite fortunate in that I had a whole 12 months to get my head around my options. Whereas I know some women, they have to have emergency or very quick hysterectomies. So during that time, I was seeing a kinesiologist for a period of time, and she invited me to really become aware of the language I was using. And the language I was using was, I've got to have a hysterectomy. And so we worked that through. And so I was able to come to some different language and a reframe of, I'm choosing to have a hysterectomy. And that was a game changer.
It was empowering, isn't it? Rather than Someone's making me versus
Yeah.
no, I'm choosing.
Yeah. So I'm choosing this. I'm just going to have a drink of water.
Yeah. This is on the back end of a virus. So along with everyone else in the country.
Yeah. So that reframe was very empowering, and as the time got closer to me choosing to make this decision, I noticed a lot of stuff was coming up that I wasn't privy to. It was completely unconscious around menopause, around my judgment of menopause, around some shame of moving into this natural life cycle.
Yeah.
So it was all up for me to look at and to explore. And the outcome of that was, I want to be really courageous. And one, what do I need around prior to me moving in towards this surgery? And I wanted to be witnessed by women, some very close women friends. And I wanted to honour and celebrate the life of my womb thus far. And so I invited about 20 women to come together for my womb celebration. And so I put a lot of thought and energy and effort into crafting a beautiful afternoon of ritual and celebration, but primarily it was around me facing some of my shame and my judgment around moving into menopause and what that means, and really challenging some of my beliefs around what that actually means.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, and to be witnessed and to encourage more conversation. You know, my hope was that these women who came then would go and talk about it amongst their circles too. To date, I haven't heard many people at that time, you know, talking about menopause and positive, women talking about the, you know, the joys and the power of moving into this very natural stage. So it was a very beautiful ceremony. And as well as that, you know, one of our invitations was for women to offer a blessing to me, whether it might be some words or an image or some drawing, when as I was recovering, I could read them all and really support me.
Yeah, beautiful.
So the beautiful ceremony and the womb celebration was just 4 days prior to my surgery. And I also wrote a beautiful love letter to my womb, which I read out, and I really wanted to be witnessed and for people to hear this, and my love and deep, this bittersweet sadness of losing my womb or her transitioning, but incredible love and deep, deep gratitude for the journey we've both been on. And while some women, you know, they may not feel that's needed, you know, one of my really good friends is just like, oh, look, I just want to get it out. I've done. Don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And mine was a completely different experience. And I feel like
isn't it?
Yeah, it's such a personal thing. Yeah, and just, you know, allowing others to have their own experience with that too.
Yeah.
So I had my surgery and I had my womb removed and my cervix. I negotiated to keep my ovaries, which I was very, very happy about. And so I feel like I've been on another journey in some of my recovery and seeking out a very, very good osteo and physiotherapist who really focuses on pelvic care. And then moving into, you know, more menopause readings and really wise women in that stage of their life. So that's really calling me. And Janet McIver up in the Sunshine Coast has written a beautiful book around menopause and tantric sex. And so it's almost like I've entered into a whole new, really juicy chapter of my life, and I can't wait, really. You know, it's just revealing more and more and more beauty and a real sense of groundedness in who I am and less worried about what people think about me. But it's another joyous stage of a woman's life. Yeah. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, a bit of my womb story, my love womb story.
Yeah. I'd love to unpack a little bit more. I know we're talking about womb, but I'm being now in my mid-40s and coming into perimenopause and starting to have these conversations with women around their experience with perimenopause. It is very much in my like, you know, we talk about the reticular activating system. Like, I hear menopause and I'm like, there it is again. There it is. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that that reframe that you went from and to, and some of the conversations that came up in that ceremony. And don't worry, I'll be unpacking more about this ceremony. I love hearing about this. So.
So I think the reframe was a really important piece, in that prior to that I felt like I was a bit like quite stubborn. It's like, no one's taking my room, no. And so my response is, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And so that very subtle reframe was very empowering, as I've just mentioned, but I felt like an adult. I felt like a wise woman making a very important decision, but taking responsibility and owning it. So there was some power within that. And then I think you also just mentioned then around this celebration, this ritual. And I think prior to that, I was doing this beautiful online course with a woman from New Zealand, and it was all about ritual, you know, in our day-to-day lives, mostly around the rituals of nature, of Mother Earth, and the cyclical nature of the seasons, and how we can honor them. And it felt really important to spend some time around, you know, what I was letting go, like emotionally, spiritually, physically, and then what I was gleaning, or what was my hope and intention on all those layers afterwards as well. And I wanted to create a really safe space for the women, but also for myself. And so you know, to have just some more setting up the scene of, you know, the four directions were really covered well, and there was some sound as well. And two other friends kind of facilitated two different parts of that.
Okay, lovely.
It's
interesting.
And there was,
sorry, like when we set these up, you've gone on your journey to be okay with the vulnerability that comes with being witnessed and putting yourself out there. And so I imagine for those women that participated in it, that would have been a really powerful experience for them to witness, because they probably wouldn't have been aware of unconscious things going on for them that could have been triggered, for want of a better word, but because they could have got to this point and gone, oh my goodness, I hadn't even thought about that aspect, or I hadn't thought about this. What's my relationship with my womb? And so I love that you were so vulnerable and so bold to create this container and this experience, not just for yourself, but really for those women as well. And I know because Lisa and I have known each other, gosh, for over 15 years. And I know Lisa is a very experienced facilitator, full stop. So I know you would have created a really welcoming, safe space. So I really want to acknowledge you for doing that. That's really powerful. It's special.
Yeah, it was very powerful. Thank you, Bea. And one of the women I invited was a woman who had had a hysterectomy not long before that,
Yeah.
but she'd had a week's notice, and it was like an emergency one. And
Yeah.
so she had quite a bit of grief afterwards around, where is my womb? You know, where is it? You know, is it in the rubbish tip? And, you
Mm.
know, so it felt really important to invite her, and no one needed to know this about her, but for her to almost share in this ceremony for her womb too.
Yeah.
Mm. And, you know, my hope is, you know, I'd love to, in time, you know, one of my other beautiful projects is to, you know, to support other women where, you know, they may be having other female reproductive parts of their body removed, like to really hold that space prior to, like, the setting up and the support beforehand and after. Like, the consciousness of doing that
Yes.
was so powerful and really supported my healing. And I think I would have had a very different experience moving into it and afterwards if I hadn't had that womb celebration.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, this is actually really perfect timing because September is Gynecological Cancer Awareness Month.
Beautiful.
So for any women who have been on or going to, or, you know, may face that in their journey, it's almost like a permission slip, isn't it, to
Yes
go down this path of honoring, connecting and honoring and celebrating these parts of us that I having worked in the women's health space for a few years now, and you know, being diagnosed with endometriosis myself back in 2004, we can be so angry with our bodies.
Yes.
That we, as you said, like, we don't want to go below the neck because it's too painful.
Yeah.
But to know that there are other women who have experienced it, who get it, and are now on the other side, to hold space for other women to celebrate and really, the word, sorry, I'm tired after a long weekend as well. The recording is enough, so my brain's not functioning as well as it could be. But yeah, just to help them along that journey and help them grieve in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I think just having the conversations or being open to conversations which they are vulnerable, you know, that you are touching on some raw parts. And you know, I know in some of my other groups of friends, you know, like, these aren't usual conversations. Yeah. So it's quite courageous to go there. And I know what really shocked me when I went and, you know, my specialist, and he said, you know, I perform 5 hysterectomies a week and I've been doing it for 27 years. And I'm going, oh my God, there are so many women in Brisbane who've had hysterectomies, you know, where are they? Why isn't anyone talking? Why can't I find any information around this? And as I mentioned, in my experience, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to find out information. Some women don't, and that's quite okay. But for the women that are watching this, you know, there are, you know, support, and there are ways that you can own and that you can journey through this in your way. And I felt, as I mentioned, like, I really have this overwhelming need. I need to do this. And so your needs, you know, might be quite different. But it's important to really check in, what am I needing prior to and afterwards.
And no, it's okay if that answer doesn't come up straight away. That it might take a bit of quiet soul searching and Yeah.
Yeah, I had like a good 12 months, so I had time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, because I know you have been working in this space, and having received one of your incredible massages, I know how you just have this ability to hold space and nurture the body. I'm I'm curious about that, how you resolve that within yourself, working, being this womb health practitioner,
Mm,
to now,
mm,
like bringing in that, okay, I need that medical science
mm,
along with this beautiful ancient wisdom. So
mm,
how was that journey in that I know you say you had that 12 months, but I'm curious about some of
mm,
those transitions or that transformation
mm.
mindset that you went
Yeah. I think when I first had this diagnosis and, the word cancer was being mentioned, I went into a bit of a tailspin, and some of it was around incredible self-judgment of, how can I have this happen? I've been teaching yoga for 20 years, and I've got such a clean diet, and
through.
I do this and I do this. How can this be? And really, and then yeah, went to some really unhealthy places internally, and so it was certainly, sharing with some of my abdominal massage sisters, Andrea, and a few other women, and they would reflect back to me and said numerous times around the depth of your knowledge now and the depth of your knowing can't but not support the women that will come to you, moving forward.
No.
And so for a while I was even, thinking thoughts like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, what type of practitioner am I to get sick, my womb to be sick? And, how can I help women if I've had this cancer in my uterus, So having those beautiful, supportive women to reflect a different frame
Yeah.
of reference and a view, a filter to view that through. And, I sought support from, a kinesiologist as well, and being vulnerable and sharing some of these really unhealthy inner dialogue that was going on.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was quite a bit of a journey as well,
Yeah.
more around my own inner critic.
Yes.
And what shifted for me was, it was probably a good year ago now, I went on a beautiful women's retreat
Nice.
by Janet McIver up in the Sunshine Coast. And, I've heard some of the practitioners I have been to saying, even though you may not physically have your womb, the energetic imprint of your womb is still very present. And until I went to this women's retreat, I kind of got it intellectually, but after that retreat, I felt it and I viscerally got it. It was
Okay.
a beautiful process that we went through of one afternoon. It was involved in some art as well.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I tapped into this energetic imprint of my womb, and it felt like that part of my being, there was even more of a potency of just this life force pulsating.
Wow.
And, after that, those questions, all those question marks, they just went away, because I had this visceral knowing response of, wow, this is still a very, very potent part of my being. And that when I offer the work I do, it's like I tune into that, my womb space, by offering from this space and my heart. And
Yeah.
so I feel it has added incredible depth and sensitivity in my fingers and my knowing, my heart, in what I offer. Mm,
Oh, that's gorgeous. I
yeah.
hear what you're saying. I think that intellectual understanding of something and that
Mm.
deep knowing is a massive shift. Like I hear you say, even though the organ won't physically be there,
Mm.
the energy still is. And
Mm.
I hear it, but I don't get it yet.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but I'm sure one day I could.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, but I'm sure there are many, many women who would connect with what you're saying because
Mm.
of their own experience with. I wonder if it's the same, you know, with breast cancer. I don't know,
Mm. Yeah, I don't know.
but
Mm.
yeah, it's that. But it would take that depth of understanding to go there to
Yeah.
make that connection in the first place. Well, how do I even make the connection to what the energetic presence is of it now? Well, it is there
Mm. Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able to hold that energy and that feeling.
Mm. Mm. I think some of the process for me was at that time, like I was still aware there was some physical and energetic trauma right at the top of my vagina, which was cut to draw out some of the organs. And so it was really kind of stopping me in being intimate with my partner. Like there was a real whenever I would feel into it, even now feeling into that time, just tears would come.
Yeah.
And so it was really cultivating and going into that part of my body and feeling the trauma and giving it words, and through art as well, like that really, really helped. And then we did this beautiful process, and then feeling into this place beyond that. And that's where I got to touch and feel and really deeply sense the truth of that well, physically my womb isn't there. This energy was still there, and so potent, so vibrant, and so bright.
Good. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I feel we've covered most of what I wanted to cover off on that.
There is just one thing I know we did
Yeah.
speak about there around, is there any, suggestions,
Yes.
advice,
Yes,
suggestions.
please.
And
Yeah.
I think to get a second or third opinion, and to don't settle for someone, a specialist that you don't feel comfortable or some level of connection and trust with. Yeah.
Absolutely essential. Definitely. That's that those boundaries, isn't it? That set around what you're going to accept and not accept.
Yes.
And
Yes.
advocating for that within yourself. It can be frustrating because I know, you're spending a couple of $100 per appointment, but it would be it's worth it to know that you're in the hands that you're because you'd feel that the stress in your body of not connecting with that specialist impede the recovery process.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
It is so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other
So
advice?
I think that was a really key one that rang home for me to remember to talk about. And I think just some other resources that I connected with was Christine Northrup. She's got a beautiful book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. Yeah. And also a website called redschool.net, which is different to the Red Tent. So redschool.net. So Alexander Pope and Sajani Weaver co-created the Red School, and it is about menstruality education, but also menopause education.
Wonderful.
And Janet McIver in the Sunshine Coast, who's written, I mentioned, a beautiful book about menopause and tantric sex. And just the divine Andrea Lopez and the Sunshine Coast to offering some stunning body work for women too.
Yeah. Well,
And
she's my next interview in a couple of weeks.
Yay. And I found it really useful to find a very good physio. She's an osteo as well, to really support me post-surgery. And every now and then it's really important for women after they've had a hysterectomy to lessen the likelihood of any future prolapse. So to really have a really healthy pelvic bowl, pelvic floor, and that we're pooing and weeing well, there's no straining whatsoever, and we're not carrying heavy things, so really caring for the pelvic floor. And there's some great couple of practitioners in Brisbane, and Belinda mentioned, I offer abdominal massage and womb steams in Brisbane as well, so very happy to
I recommend going.
Chat. Thank you.
Beautiful work. Awesome. Well, before we do finish, I want to check in. What was the kindest thing anyone ever did or said for you? The journey.
I had a couple of appointments with my oncologist where I invited two separate girlfriends to come with me. My partner John was working, and I really felt like I needed support. Usually, I'm fiercely independent and I rarely ask for support. So it felt really nourishing to have some women friends with me. And, I think they benefited enormously too, just by being asked and coming along. I think that was incredible. And a couple of conversations I had, with some wise older women around my choices when I was deliberating to or not to have a hysterectomy. And seeking their wisdom in that they've journeyed through this path already. And so they were very generous with their information and continuing to follow up with me.
Beautiful. All right.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Bea.
When we post this in the group, I would love if you have time at some point to write in the comments some of those resources.
Yes. Yeah.
Lisa is a member of the group. If you've got any comments or questions, or even just, how much it resonated with your particular story, because I know for a fact that there are women in the group who have said goodbye to their wombs as well. So I'm sure there will be many parts of your story that will resonate with them. And I love how you shared the full spectrum of the reality of the thoughts. It wasn't just like, oh yes, I was so at peace with it all and I just let it go and it was amazing. It was just like the raw truth. I was judging myself. I didn't want to let it go. So I just know that's going to be just going to resonate with so many women. So thank you so much for being there. And
thank you, Belinda. It's been a pleasure.
Well, yes, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments of the video below, and we will do our best to answer them. And as I said, Andrea Lopez is going to be interviewing, I'll be interviewing her in a couple of weeks' time to share even more about caring for the womb and the womb space. So keep your eye out for that one as well. But I'll wrap it up there for now. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I'll see everyone else in the group soon. Good night or goodbye, good morning, whenever you're listening to it.